happen.
The storm is eating up the house, and I'm spinning with it.
It just sounded like it was just ripping the floors right up off of the foundation.
I thought I was gone. Actually, I thought we were both gone.
I knew that things were going to get very out of control very quickly.
From the Weather Channel, this is Storm Stories with meteorologist Jim Cantori.
Early May 2003 marks the beginning of a nightmare for sections of the Midwest. In 1 week, nearly 400 tornadoes will be unleashed in 25 states. For 42-year-old professional storm tracker Jeff Petrovsky, it's a chance to do what he does best: chase twisters.
The weather gives you clues what's going to happen before it happens, and it's putting those pieces of the puzzle together is what fascinates me.
Petrovsky has been mesmerized with extreme weather since he was 14. It was then that he survived a flash flood after being washed off a bridge in his native Tulsa, Oklahoma.
I swam vigorously to a fence. I held onto the fence for about 4 hours that evening, and seeing furniture and things flow by. And being 14 years old, that had a tremendous impact on your life.
Sunday, May 4th, 2003. At daybreak, Jeff leaves Tulsa and heads north toward the border with Kansas. He is on the trail of a storm that will spawn one of the most violent tornadoes ever witnessed. A twister that will shred southeast Kansas. By 12:35 p.m., this region is already under what's called a PDS, a particularly dangerous situation tornado watch. That's the assessment given by the National Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma. The advisory also covers parts of Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Missouri. Part of the region under alert is in what's known as Tornado Alley. And by 3 p.m., they're in a direct line of fire. Petrovsky is now driving in eastern Kansas along the Missouri state line. He's excited and anxious.
The fear of the tornadoes coming into your location in your house and approaching your car is extreme.
As the storm chaser stalks his prey, he monitors the radio reports.
Seek shelter in a culvert, ditch, or low spot and cover your head with
4:19 p.m. The National Weather Service issues a tornado warning for Crawford County in southeastern Kansas. Outside the small community of Girard, 84-year-old Laverna Gimmel is on the phone. The Spry Society reporter is working her beat for the Girard Press, getting the scoop on recent events from friends and neighbors.
They tell me where they've been and what they did, and then I send that in to the newspapers.
Laverna still lives on this 1,500-acre farm, even after her husband Wayne died 20 years ago.
I moved to that farm because I married the guy that lived on that farm. It's the only place I know.
The widow's beloved home, however, is in danger. In the skies overhead is the buildup of a supercell, an intense thunderstorm with a strong rotating updraft. It doesn't take long for those rotating winds to produce a tornado. 4:32 p.m. The twister forms 14 miles outside Girard, just minutes from the Gimmel farm. Storm chaser Jeff Petrovsky is now 19 miles away, speeding up to catch the large funnel.
I continue heading west toward Girard, Kansas, and I get about 5 miles west, and what I see to my southwest is about a quarter-mile wide tornado on the ground.
Large tornado on the ground.
Back at Laverna's house, she is still making calls, unaware that an enormous twister is plowing directly toward her.
My neighbor lady and I were talking. It made no sound at my place. There was no rain. There was no hail.
As the twister closes in, it gains strength. It is an F2 on the Fujita scale, which rates the intensity of a tornado. Its winds are estimated to be surging to 157 miles an hour. Suddenly, Laverna's phone goes dead.
There was a big noise, and I looked, and my big double window in the bedroom had blown in. It looked like smoke, which I assume was dust, was coming in that window.
She quickly realizes it's a tornado that's barreling down on her house. Less than a mile away, her neighbors are outside snapping photos of the twister. They watch in horror as the black mass engulfs Laverna's property. The 84-year-old has no time to seek shelter. The house explodes in on her. She is caught in the grip of the powerful monster as it lifts her off the floor.
I was whirling, and then I just sat down real hard. And I think it must suck all the oxygen out of you, because I seemingly passed out.
The house collapses around her, one of hundreds of structures in the path of a tornado outbreak raging across the Midwest. Just down the road from Laverna's house, Captain John Gagliardo is witnessing the destruction. He's one of many storm spotters hard at work for the Crawford County Sheriff's Department.
I was probably within a mile of Mrs. Gimmel's house when you could see it just take it out, and it just looked like it was taking toothpicks and throwing them out.
Captain Gagliardo heads for the Gimmel farm and calls for assistance to help search the wreckage for Laverna. As the twister charges past the widow's house, Jeff Petrosky follows it. He speeds ahead and captures this video of the tornado heading northeast.
Large maxi tornado coming into Gerard. I literally saw whole trees being sucked out of the ground and disappearing in like half seconds into the tornado.
The twister is growing in size. It quickly reaches F4 status, the second highest rating for a tornado. Winds are pushing more than 200 miles an hour.
The tornado is much stronger now. It's much wider. It's rotating much faster.
Petrosky may have a great vantage point, but now the huge funnel cloud is heading straight at him.
Debris falling out of the sky over my vehicle, so you have to be very aware of what's falling around you and what's coming towards you.
Jeff waits until the last moment before jumping into his truck and slamming on the gas.
Here it comes. I'm moving.
Right in front.
About 10 miles away, Laverna Gimmel regains consciousness. She is trapped under the rubble of her shattered house. Captain Gagliardo arrives on the scene. He is joined by several rescue workers, including some of Laverna's neighbors. But they can't tell if she is alive in this twisted mass of wood.
We did an initial search for Mrs. Gimmel with no response. She would answer back to our calls or anything.
At last, the elderly woman summons the strength to cry out. But Gagliardo and the others are having trouble finding her beneath the rubble.
So I finally put my hand up through that hole, and I said, "Did that help?" And he said, "Yeah, now I know where you are."
Laverna waits patiently as the group pulls away the debris piece by piece. John agonizes, not knowing how badly the 84-year-old is hurt, but he is amazed at her resilience in surviving this kind of destruction.
Apparently she's a brave little thing. There was no anger, there was no frightened sound in her voice.
Minutes later, Laverna is extracted from the rubble. Incredibly, she has sustained only minor injuries. She is stunned at the damage to her home.
I just couldn't believe it. There was nothing but stumps, roots, trees uprooted. There was nothing.
And the tornado is still on the ground, carving an erratic path toward the next town.
Tornadoes don't move in a straight, perfect line. A lot of times they will move east and then northeast and then east again. They what we call jog.
Now it's taking aim at the small community of Franklin, Kansas. Jeff Petrosky is hot on the trail, videotaping as multiple tornadoes swirl around the main funnel.
I'm stunned. That's another way to describe it. It's almost like a half-mile wide bulldozer. It just kind of levels everything.
The twister has been on the ground for an extraordinary 40 minutes. It is now an upper-level F4. close to the highest rating of F5 on the Fujita scale. Winds are estimated at about 260 miles an hour, and the base of the tornado has grown to a half-mile wide. Jeff knows this kind of power has a deadly potential.
It was literally going into the city of Franklin. I had a horrible feeling in my stomach because I knew what was getting ready to happen. You couldn't stop it.
Tornado coming down the highway.
Sunday, May 4th, 2003. 3 supercell thunderstorms stretch across the border of Kansas and Missouri, producing the beginning of an outbreak of tornadoes. Across sections of the Midwest, there are reports of more than 20 twisters, and 7 people are dead. At 5:11 p.m., an upper-level F4 tornado rips into the heart of Franklin, Kansas. Winds approaching 260 miles an hour tear homes from their foundations. Franklin, a small community of 500 people, is sucked up and violently spit out. The town is left in ruins. Professional storm chaser Jeff Petrosky is there, capturing the tornado on video.
It's very difficult at times to keep your emotions intact. You know that people are probably been injured or possibly killed.
The tornado destroys 80% of the homes in Franklin. Remarkably, only 1 person is killed. Then it moves east through the countryside toward the Missouri border. The mammoth twister is chewing up the fields beneath it, traveling at about 35 miles an hour. 5:15 p.m., 15 miles away just west of Liberal, Missouri. 76-year-old Louise Nichols is with her 41-year-old daughter, Suzette Cowan. They're relaxing in their rented home when they hear news reports about the tornado.
They showed on there to us about the storm coming, that it was going to miss Liberal, so we never thought too much about that.
It kept saying it was north, so I thought, we'll miss it.
5:21 p.m., their phone rings. It's a friend and neighbor, 32-year-old Brent Hanshaw, a local storm spotter. He is 5 miles away in his pickup truck. Hail is engulfing his vehicle. Brent tells the women that based on his experience, a tornado is on its way.
I said, it sounds like this thing might be moving kind of in your direction. It might be a good idea to find a basement.
Suzette thinks Brent is overreacting, but she soon changes her mind.
I just wasn't getting it through my head that it was a bad storm until I heard the hail hitting the truck when he called.
Suzette hangs up and yells to her mother. The frightened women run for cover into their basement. 1 mile away, Jeff Petrosky is barreling toward Liberal, Missouri, slightly ahead of the tornado. It has now been on the ground for nearly an hour.
I've tracked a lot of tornadoes, but I could tell this one was like, you keep thinking in the back of your mind, is this going to stop? Surely this can't continue, but it does.
Jeff keeps driving and comes to an intersection 2 miles west of Liberal. By now, the tornado begins losing some of its size. It's an F3 with a base about a quarter-mile wide. Winds drop to an estimated 160 miles an hour.
Oh, Lord.
But the twister's form creates a new problem.
Oh, no. I bring up the camera and I notice that the tornado is starting to intensify.
Petrosky can tell that the tornado is on a direct path toward one particular house, the home of Suzette Cowan and her mother, Louise Nichols.
I'm thinking, do I go knock on the door and tell them it's coming? And then I think, no, that they're probably in the basement. I don't want to get them out of the basement and then have the tornado hit.
Suzette and Louise are underground, in a safe room attached to the cellar. The room has been designed as a storm shelter. Its 4 walls and ceiling are all made of concrete. While Louise sits in the safe room, Suzette decides to step out into the basement area. Suzette is hoping to catch a glimpse of the twister.
I looked out the west window and I seen this huge huge thing. I really didn't know what it was at first because I'd never seen, a tornado before.
I kept telling her to get in here, because you could hear it. You could hear it coming.
Oh, I think I was up in the stock. And then when I realized what it was, I kind of got a little panicky and went into the storm room.
At that moment, the huge twister jogs closer to their house. Debris is hurled into the air and flies over Jeff Petrosky's head.
When you get missile debris or hail going through the air at really high rate of speed, 70, 80, 90 miles an hour, it makes a kind of a cutting sound. It's like a shoo, shoo.
The storm chaser moves to the back of his truck for better protection and keeps his camera running.
You heard the roar, the rumble. A lot of people say the tornado sounds like a freight train. I would describe the more violent tornadoes, probably the best way to describe it is like 6 or 7 B-52s taken off at one time.
Oh, it was a terrible roar. Just a terrible noise. You can't imagine. There's no way.
I could hear the boards just breaking and the wind.
You say, we're not going to make it this time, Mom. We're not going to make it this time, Mom. I kept saying, yes, we are. We're going to. We just have to.
Outside, Petrovsky realizes it's time to get out of the way of the twister. Wind speeds are kicking up to 170 miles an hour. With his camera still running, he climbs into his vehicle and speeds away.
My gut instinct kicked in at that second and said, get out of here now.
Suzette and Louise don't have that chance. In their safe room, the towering monster is right on top of them.
Well, you could hear the roof go off. It just sounded like it was just ripping the floors right up off of the foundation.
By this point in the day, it's becoming clear that the twister in Franklin, Missouri is the beginning of the biggest tornado outbreak in nearly 30 years. Sunday, May 4th, 2003. By 5:30 p.m., more than 30 twisters have ravaged parts of the Midwest. Near Liberal, Missouri, an F3 tornado with winds nearing 200 miles an hour is ripping apart the home of Suzette Cowan and her mother, Louise Nichols. The two women cling to each other in the cement-safe room in their basement.
We were crying and screaming. You could feel some of the wind in there with pieces of dirt, coming around, and it was hitting us.
It seemed like it lasted forever and a day. I kept saying to myself, I wish it'd hurry up and get over.
Within seconds, everything becomes still.
I looked up and I seen out the door that one side of the house was gone.
When we come out of the basement and I turned and looked, there wasn't nothing there.
Louise and Suzette are uninjured, but their rental home is destroyed. They are forced into temporary living quarters at a shelter in town before finding another house to rent.
I broke down when it was all over with. You get to thinking about the things you had for years and years, and just blink your eye and it's gone.
The tornado marches northeast, but after 35 miles on the ground, the stubborn twister finally disappears. Storm chaser Jeff Petrosky has spent 12 hours chasing the incredible tornado outbreak. The magnitude of what he's witnessed slowly sinks in.
I've seen hundreds of tornadoes, and I'm telling you, it's nothing like anything else I've ever witnessed or experienced.
By the end of May 4th, a total of 94 tornadoes are recorded. By May 11th, nearly 400 tornadoes have touched down in 25 states, killing 40 people and causing an estimated $1 billion in damage. Thousands of residents are forced to relocate. But 84-year-old Laverna Gimmel, one of the first victims of the outbreak, is rebuilding her home.
Even though there's no trees, there's no bushes, no flowers, nothing, it still has that feeling that that's home. But I want to make an archway at my place You know, every farm has a name, or some of them do. I want to put Gone with the Wind on mine, because that's what happened.
If a home already has a basement, is a specially strengthened safe room still needed? We'll tell you when Storm Stories continues. Many experts say yes. That's because some strong tornadoes can destroy the floor framing, collapsing debris into the basement. This can easily cause death or serious injury to individuals inside the basement. However, a basement is the safest place to seek shelter for a home with no safe room. For Storm Stories, I'm meteorologist Jim Cantore. Your local forecast is next.